Welcome to Vegan Open Mic. Every time, three ordinary people, 15 minutes each, sharing how they live, think, and act on veganism. Let's look back at the best moments. First speaker, Ronnie Lee. After 54 years of campaigning, what does he think actually works?
What do we want animal liberation? What do they mean, and what do I mean by animal liberation? Because what we all mean is the widespread freeing of our fellow animals from the tyranny imposed on them by the human species. That's what we mean by animal liberation. In terms of the food industry, the oppression and exploitation of fellow animals for food, the minimum estimate for the number of animals killed per second to feed humans throughout the world is 250,000 per second. And of course, that's totally unnecessary and totally wrong, because we could all live perfectly healthily on a vegan diet. And then we have other forms of the oppression of other animals. And so it's so important to educate ordinary people to believe in animal liberation, and that means educating ordinary people to become vegan, according to what veganism really means, which is a philosophy based on the principle that humans should not exploit fellow animals. And so that means that we have to have a lot more vegan outreach. And who's going to carry out that outreach? That has to be vegans. Has to be us vegans ourselves. And very sadly, so few vegans are actually involved in actively promoting veganism. That has to change. Those vegans have to be persuaded to become activists in the same way that we want to persuade non-vegans to become vegan. And how I look at it is this way: that if I'm walking along the road and I see a man kicking a dog, my moral duty is to intervene in some way to stop that man kicking the dog, to do what I can according to my own capabilities to try to stop that from happening. It's not good enough for me to walk past just being content that I don't kick a dog myself. And it's the same with with regard to veganism. A non-vegan really is equivalent to a person kicking a dog, because they're actually paying others to kill animals for them. And if someone paid someone else to kick a dog instead of kicking the dog themselves, that would be just as bad. So we have non-vegans in the position of a person kicking a dog. It's the number of animals that are spared by people becoming vegan. Here in the UK, the average number of animals killed every year to feed a non-vegan is about 100. So if we educate somebody to become vegan, it means that there's a reduction in demand for each of those people for 100 animals to be killed per year. So that can be equated to 100 animals a year spared from suffering and slaughter. So even in that sense, even in that more immediate sense, vegan education is vitally important. And it's not easy. It's not going to be easy. And the other thing is we don't necessarily have to educate a majority of people to become vegan. I think just a large minority, so that we can have that cultural shift by having a large minority of people that kind of think that way. So I think that's what we've got to do. It's so vitally important that we have vegan education as much as possible everywhere, and carried out by as many vegans as possible. And I believe if we can achieve that situation, we can obtain animal liberation. No, I think what's important is to think of the why rather than the how. The why comes first. Why be vegan? The reason to be vegan is so that you're avoiding playing a part in the exploitation and oppression our fellow animals. That's the why. And then when you've decided, right, I no longer want to be a part of that, I want to do my best not to be a part of that, that's when you get onto the how and think about, well, how do I do that? How do I replace the animal products I'm consuming with vegan friendly products? So I think it's really always important to put the why before the how, because however difficult somebody might think it is to live as a vegan, it's far more difficult for those animals that suffer and die if that person doesn't live as a vegan.
Second speaker, Paolo Gemma, an Italian chef in Hong Kong. His advice starts at the dinner table.
Anyway, so I just as well quickly introduce myself. I'm Italian. I live in Hong Kong with my cats in a small village by the sea, on the biggest and less inhabited island of all the Hong Kong territory. But during my year, my passion brought me to develop deep specialization in food fermentation and plant-based culinary innovation. I'm Italian, so I love food and I like to cook. And it's easy also to feel helpless. But I do not believe that we are helpless. I do not believe that we are useless, that our efforts are of no use. I believe that every one of us can have a meaningful impact. It's just the law of the large number, or citing an old British saying, correct me if I'm wrong, many a little makes a mickle. And in Italian, we say, tanto poco fa un assai, which actually translates more or less the same. A lot of a little makes a lot. So let me tell you what I think. I believe in the contagious power of example. The way that we behave can inspire someone close to us. And that person can inspire others in turn. That's our domino effect begins. For me, the most practical solution is much simpler. Returning to whole food, plant-based home cooking. And based of all, prioritizing seasonal ingredients. Because actually nature provides exactly what our body needs, precisely when we need it. If you think about it, India has dal, chapati, or chawal. It's rice or bread with lentils. In many Asian food culture, we have rice or noodle paired with tofu or tempeh, like in Indonesia. Even in my own Italian tradition, pasta e fagioli, which just noodle with beans, is also a perfect example. It's a simple dish that gives us carbs, fats, and protein in one dish, and without killing any animals or exploiting any animals. It's very simple and very cheap as well. So my simple idea to give example is like, for example, as a vegetarian or a vegan, and I prefer vegan, of course, just invite your relatives or friends for dinner and serve them a fully plant-based home-cooked meal. You do not even need to announce that it's plant-based or vegan. In fact, it may be better if you do not, because many people carry biases about vegan food, and and that label vegan can make them defensive before even taste the meal. So just serve good food. Let the flavor speak first. Do not lecture them. If the topics come out, explain gently why they do not need to worry so much about nutrients. Educate with humility. So the second point, our power as a consumer. Every time I buy vegetable, legumes, grains, or whatever plant-based product, I send a signal to the market. The seller needs to replenish the stock. They realize that those are products customers are going to ask. And this is true for local wet markets, for small stores, and even more powerful in supermarket chains where, consumption habits are carefully analyzed and interpreted. Remember, eventually, every plant-based meal matters. Every purchase matters. Every example matters. Because real change often begins with just small action. And just as an ocean is made of countless drops of water, a more compassionate world is built on countless compassionate choice. Thank you so much.
So the speaker, Martin Whybrow, he interviewed 60 activists for a book. Here is what he found.
So my name is Martin Whybrow. I would describe myself as an activist, although nothing like the longevity and the depth of Ronnie's activism, but also a writer. So I'm a career journalist, and what I have done in the last couple of years is really pivot towards writing about the animal advocacy ecosystem, about animal welfare, animal rights, because I thought that that was what I could contribute the most. My one skill is really the ability to write. So that led me to write my first book, which came out a few months ago. I interviewed over 60 people for it, including Ronnie. I think Ronnie may have the most number of index entries. It's a close run thing with one or two others, but Ronnie certainly features heavily in the book. I think there are a lot of people in sort of reflective mode, basically asking, what has worked, what hasn't worked. Are the things that we've been doing for years and years still relevant today? And I suppose, to put it slightly more nuanced, what should we prioritize? Because I agree with Paolo when he said a lot of a little makes a lot. I don't think there's anything out there that isn't working. We need everything at scale. So the first one I would highlight is the vegan land movement. So these are people that are unique. There's nobody else doing this. It's one of the things that I really liked when I was researching the book, suddenly stumbling across somebody that was doing something different from everybody else. So what the vegan land movement is doing is taking land out of livestock farming, buying that land at auction, and then rewilding it. Now, you're not going to change the world by buying plots of land one at a time. It's pretty small scale. They've had 9 successes so far. They've been at this for 4 or 5 years. And there's a couple of benefits. Firstly, they've been rewilding. So there's a very strong message around the destruction of livestock farming to the countryside and how that can be turned around over a relatively short space of time. So they do annual surveys of the biodiversity of these plots of land, and it shows really good results. So the vegan land movement raises funds from the vegan community. Now, when I spoke to Rita, the founder, she pointed out that if every vegan in the UK gave maybe a couple of quid a week to the vegan land movement, boy, could they buy a lot of dairy land. They could buy almost a dairy farm every month, really, and they could sort of really scale. A much bigger profile and much more international is We Animals. I interviewed Joanne MacArthur, and people on this call may know We Animals, but they use photojournalism so powerfully, I think. We have a phrase in the UK, a picture paints 1,000 words, and they are very much sort of complementing what others do, but such stunning assignments, photojournalist assignments, and also they do a great lot of work encouraging, training the next generation of photojournalists. Final one I'd mention is Ethical Vegans Community in Uganda. I had the great pleasure of interviewing Nabufo Brenda this week. They've got a whole bunch of things, loads of outreach. They're going into schools, doing great work with schools. They've transformed 40 farms from livestock farming to plant-based. And they've also got a great project where they are literally standing outside slaughterhouses and talking to workers and transforming them into plant-based lifestyles. So there's these great groups that could, and I think should, get more attention. The example, and this is the final thing I will say, the example I give is Peter Singer, who famously wrote the book Animal Liberation, which had a massive impact on so many people. His pivot to writing about animal rights came from a conversation in a lunch queue at Oxford University. If he hadn't have had that conversation and the subsequent conversations with that vegetarian student, would he have written the book? One person who read the book was Ingrid Newkirk. Ingrid was going to train as a stockbroker. She read the book and set up Peter. And Peter has done such an enormous amount of work across the globe since then. So that shows the potential power of outreach. You never know what that person is going to go on to do.
Could you be our next speaker? 15 minutes to share your vegan story. Write to us.